What is up, Ram Nation? We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live, a live extension of the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Chevalier Mortgage. As always, I'm your main man, Justin Michael, and we've got just quite a bit to go over today. I mean, we got to spend our first significant time with Matt Mumme as well as Freddy Banks, the various coordinators that have been brought in to help Jay Norvell try and turn this thing around. Pretty excited about the direction of the program, guys. I really feel like they're down to earth. Take it with a grain of salt. I guess I'll add that just before we dive into it, just because it's pretty easy to win the intro press conference. And that's what I talked about with Jay Norvell. I mean, it's more of a red flag if you don't do well the first time you speak and, kind of lay out your vision for what you expect, why you got hired, why you're excited to work with Jay, all of that. But it felt very genuine. I liked what I heard as far as just being flexible and, kind of scheming to the skills of your players. I'm going to talk about that. Matt Mumme, his dad literally invented the air raid. It'd be pretty easy for him to get set in his ways to be just one of those typical football coaches that, thinks they know it all. But it's clear that he's willing to improvise. He's learned a lot from the coaches that he's worked with over the years. And I'm looking forward to diving into that. And then we will talk about the men's basketball team. The Rammies back to their winning ways, took down Utah State 77-72 to advance to 12-1 on the year. We'll give some takeaways on that performance, the direction of the team moving forward, all of that fun stuff. If you take away anything from today, it's just going to be relax a little bit, take a chill pill. Some of you guys need to think before you tweet, and remember that this team is 12-1. Before we dive into all this, Chevalier Mortgage's ultimate goal is to take the stress out of buying and refinancing. They strive to give their borrowers options with their full financial picture in mind, with the highest level of integrity, always putting their borrowers first. Something to keep in mind for our homeowners. With prices going up, it's creating natural equity in your home. If you have mortgage insurance, chances are you can refinance out of that, make the bubble work for you. If you're in the buyer's market, you know how stressful trying to buy a house is right now. I mean, especially out in Colorado, it's crazy out here. Let Mike and Virginia Chevalier help you take the burden off of this process. They're going to alleviate so much stress, and they're just going to take some of that worry off of your plate. They're proud DNVR members. They're CSU alum, and they actually have a fun perk for DNVR listeners if you go to dnvrmortgage.com. Not only are you going to be able to enter to win a free DNVR shirt or hat, most importantly, you're going to get set up with a free consultation to discuss all your options. That's dnvrmortgage.com. You can also give my guy Mike a call directly at 970-412-2472. Or again, just go to dnvrmortgage.com. Michael Chevalier, NMLS number 1931006. Virginia Chevalier, NMLS number 1910631. All right, let's just jump right into it. I tried to make this as concise as possible. We spent an hour today with Norvell, Mumme, and Banks, so obviously a lot of information to kind of dive into, but yeah, the first thing I want to say is Norvell just seems like a cool guy, like the type of person you would want to hang out with. He's definitely the most stylish coach that I've gotten to cover so far. I know that you guys don't care about that, but I do. He's got some swag, came out today rocking the sweater over the polo, got the, real sharp football coach looking. I don't know. I dig his whole persona. I like a guy that's confident and, dresses, like he cares and looks good and knows that he looks good. And that's certainly Norvell. When I was around him at the Mountain West Media Days in Vegas, he definitely had the sharpest suit on of anybody there. So this is consistent. It's not a one-hit wonder with him. He brings his A game every day when it comes to the swag element. One of the things, and you'll see this kind of quote circulating on Twitter now because CSU Football shared a clip from it. Jay Norvell really respects the history, and I just liked a lot of what he had to say on, the program. He told us that he recently spent time with Sonny Lubick, and I kind of asked him, how familiar were you with Sonny prior to coming in? Because obviously Jay's been in the game for a long time. He's been around the block. He admitted, most of what he knows now, he kind of picked up, since taking the job, and that's okay. I respect the honesty of his answer, but he really, you could see in his face how excited he got to kind of talk about the time he spent with Sonny And he talked about all these common coaches that they knew and just the respect that he had for him and what he'd established here and how important it is to him that Sonny feels welcome and at home at CSU football. I mean, he brought up when he worked at Oklahoma back in the day, and Barry Switzer, obviously big, the building's named after Barry Switzer, one of the greatest coaches of all time. I believe he went to be the AD as well. He lived 2 blocks away from the OU football facility when Jay Norvell was there. And he would just come in all the time, just walking his golden retriever, just hanging out. And everybody loved it because, that was Barry Switzer's program. This is Sonny Lubbock's program. And he said that multiple times. I really love the answer. Again, it's what you should say, like pander to the CSU fans a little bit, bring up the guy that we all love. We're going to eat that shit up. But it felt very genuine. And that's the thing that's kind of stood out to me about these coaches and all my interactions with them thus far. It's just, they seem like very genuine guys. Like I'm not trying to take shots at the previous staff or anything like that. But I mean, even going back to the very first one-on-one that I had with Steve Addazio, there was just this sense that, he wanted to be anywhere but where he was in that room with me. And I get it. I mean, it was one of those awkward situations where I got a one-on-one, then Kevin got a one-on-one, Eddie got a one. So it's just, back to back to back. From a convenience standpoint, I understand why those happen, but it's basically the worst way you can do an interview because if you're the last guy to go, obviously they're fed up, they don't want to do it anymore. And I was definitely one of the last guys to go. I was also one of the last guys to go with Jay Norvell though. And, he couldn't have been any more genuine with me, gave me eye contact the entire time, answered everything graciously, even gave me extended time. I mean, they were on a time crunch there. And I've just been very, very impressed. And I've really appreciated how down to earth these new football coaches seem to be. I mean, there tends to be this sense of superiority, entitlement. I don't really know what it is. It's the ego just getting inflated by all the power you get as a head coach. It seems like based on everything that we've heard from the people that have worked with Norvell, the players that have, suited up for him and the way he's conducted himself here over this first month, he kind of seems like a different guy, a Nico Medved type where it's just, there are rare diamonds in this industry where not only are they good coaches, but they also are good people. I get that impression so far. It's early, again, I don't want to jump to too far of conclusions here, but I just really like the vibe of the program right now. He told us that he recently sat down with Tim Cassidy, who is the senior associate athletic director / football chief of staff, which is a super badass title, by the way. They mapped out their 12-month plan. He kind of explained how they like to work backwards and kind of go from there. Everybody's obviously really excited to get the players back on campus, begin those winter workouts. But really, I mean, it's going to be about recruiting these next couple of weeks. You can kind of start to implement some stuff in the winter workouts, from a culture standpoint. You can, show some film and stuff, but it's not like you're out there, running drills or anything like that. So this next month or so, it's really going to come down to recruiting. They're about to go into a contact period, which obviously means that, they can go to those high schools. They can kind of just spend some time with the players and get to know them a little bit. There's currently about 6 open scholarships. That number is ever changing. And obviously they're going to really focus on defense, which is not new. I mean, we kind of knew that. He mentioned back during the early period that he wanted the defensive coordinator, who is not Freddie Gibbs. Oh my goodness, it's been a long couple of days. He wanted the defensive coordinator to have a role in that. We got to spend some time with him today. It was great to meet Freddy Banks. Excuse me. They are going to continue to emphasize cornerback, and that's going to be a big focal point for the defense, what they want to do recruiting wise. What I really want to talk about is kind of what we learned about the status of the Colorado kids, which is obviously something that I think a lot of people are going to be concerned with or, have an opinion on at the very least. There were 7 guys from Colorado originally committed under Steve Addazio. As of right now, Coyote Jr., the wide receiver / defensive back out of Cherry Creek, will play wide receiver at CSU. he's the only original commit to sign with Norvell. We've seen a lot of posts recently from guys on the status of their scholarships or lack thereof, I guess, moving forward. Norvell did say today, though, he wants these guys to be a part of the program, and he intends to go out and meet them, face to face with some of these other coaches. And, I imagine most of them will get offered preferred walk-on opportunities. And I hope to see guys like, Bryce Johnson and Cooper Walton end up as Rams in the end. But I also wouldn't blame them if they felt disrespected by the process and they want to move on. It's just one of those tough realities of a staff change. And we've already, made this point before in terms of roster turnover. So I'm not going to go on a big, long monologue here. But unfortunately, when you make a staff change and when you, shift ideologies and what you are going to be doing this drastically, there's always going to be people that aren't happy. You can't necessarily please everybody in this scenario. And it's unfortunate that guys get scholarships pulled in this reality. I mean, I wish that the school could still honor a scholarship and, not even necessarily have them on the football team, but just be like, look, we can't have you on the team because that's over numbers. But if you really want to come to CSU, we'll still honor your scholarship. Like that feels like it would be a less scummy way to do it to me, but that's not how it works. And it's unfortunate you got a limited number, and you're paying Norvell to come in here and turn it around, and people want to win. And, if you want to win, you kind of got to have to trust him to handle this talent evaluation process and make some of these difficult decisions when it comes to scholarships. And, his vision for the program is not necessarily going to, be in line with what Adazi was. And why would it? It's completely different. They don't do anything alike. So I get that it's a tough situation, and I definitely, send my best regards to those Colorado kids that were recruited and now no longer have a scholarship. I feel for them. I'm not going to celebrate it or anything like that. It sucks. It's an unfortunate product of hopefully, building a winning football program. And, some of that kind of comes down to recruiting and just having high standards for talent. I know Adazio loved to sell himself as this guy that was going to, find the diamonds in the rough and coach him up. And, he had this ability apparently, to identify talent that nobody else was, or, talent that FCS teams were interested in, or Big Sky teams and, stuff like that. But I honestly think the reality of it was he just wasn't that interested in trying to go out and recruit aggressively. And it's hard work to land some of these players over Power 5 schools. It's not like a 2-night process. It's days and days of communication. It's scouting. It's establishing those relationships with the families and the coaches. And that's a process that some coaches just really aren't that interested in. And maybe it's unfair of me to say that of Adazio, but that's at least what it looks like, because when you see the level of talent committing now and then the types of players that Norvell has already been able to pull without even coaching here at CSU, I mean, it's pretty clear. Like they were kind of on coast mode when it comes to the recruiting process. They went out and they found some guys. Again, like I was excited about, Cooper Walton, and I still think Bryce Johnson can be a pretty good D1 player. And Coyote, again, I really like his potential, but I mean, it's tough to argue. And, Norvell's coming in here and pulling former 4-stars and getting guys to flip from UCLA to CSU and former Washington commits and all that stuff. I mean, it's just, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. And it's clear that this staff is really doing a dynamite job recruiting wise. So I'm excited to see, how it all comes together. And then I'm obviously excited to see how this offense, comes together. Norvell talked about how excited he is to continue to be able to work with Matt Mumme. He obviously brought over Bill Best, the offensive line coach, Chad Savage, who is the tight ends coach and handles a lot of their recruiting responsibilities as well. That continuity, it's big for being able to hit the ground running. It's also big that they were able to bring over so many of these former Nevada players, and I'll talk about that when we get to Matt Mumme. But one of the things that Norvell really wants to emphasize is that everything that they do in this program is going to be built on repetition and fundamentals. And, he kind of made it clear today that they have a long way to go in kind of getting this thing where they want it. The way that they practice is going to change drastically the style. I mean, it's a type of football that you can kind of fine tune and work on 365 days a year. That's not necessarily the case when you're a power running team. The physicality of that, that's not something you can do every single day. You know what you can do every day? Throw a football, catch the football. So it's a lot of responsibility on these skill position guys, on the quarterbacks to do the right thing. Obviously, they're still in the process of trying to add more wide receivers to the mix. We did find out today that Dante Wright is a guy that they obviously were in contact with, definitely wanted to keep here at CSU. They do intend to move him to more of a slot receiver, which makes sense. I there were a lot of things that they did with Dante Wright in the last couple of years that didn't make sense to me, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how they're able to kind of put him in a position to best utilize his skills. And again, that's kind of the theme of today is just being being flexible and having that ability to adapt. The best coaches, they adapt to their players, and that's what really stood out to me about Matt Mumme. Obviously, I want to talk about that, so I'm just going to move into it. I had a couple of other points I was going to get to, but we'll just keep it rolling here. The beauty of the air raid is that it's fairly simple. I mean, it's you spread it out. You do have a lot of concepts and variations of what you can do, but the point of the offense is relatively simple. We're trying to stretch the field, and the thing that's really stood out to me about Matt Mumme is his air raid is not his father's air raid. How Mumme obviously created it and was able to kind of take some, West Texas big gunslinging mindset and took a lot of the concepts that they were running at BYU in the 80s and 90s and was able to create this offense in the 80s. And the big difference with Matt Mumme's air raid is obviously that it operates out of the pistol, and that was something that he picked up actually after he separated from his dad from a coaching perspective. I mean, he was at New Mexico State with his dad in the WAC from 2005 to 2008. There, they obviously faced Nevada, who used to be in the WAC. Chris Alt. Nevada's always run the pistol, and he just hated going up against it. He felt like those offenses were just really hard for his teams to go up against. And so when he eventually moved on and became the head coach at LaGrange College, which is a private school in Georgia, he decided that he was going to take the air raid and implement some principles that he learned, from the West Coast offense and from the pistol. And it's really worked out well for him. And obviously it was a match made in heaven when he then went to Nevada, teamed up with Norvell, because they've always run the pistol. So it worked out really well. I like that he's willing to change it up. I kind of talked about this point earlier, but his dad created this offense. He's been running it since the 4th grade. It would be easy for him to have the my way or the highway mentality, to act like, how dare you question the system, or how dare you, suggest something different because, who knows this system better than me? But that's not how he is. When he wants to put his teams in position based on the talent that they have, and he wants to learn things from other coaches. And if it's working, he's going to try it out. And I think that's really cool, because I don't think that was the case with the last staff. I think it was a lot of just trying to jam square pegs into circles, like, oh, I believe in this. I've always done it this way. It's going to work this way. Well, that's not necessarily true. You have to change things based on the guys you have. And that's what we saw out of Mumme at Nevada. It's not just saying it. He actually did it. When he first got there, they had Ty Ganji at quarterback, who was a guy that I really enjoyed watching, actually, a dual threat guy, kind of a run and gun, dual threat option. He could stretch the field. Like I said, he had a big arm, but he was basically the complete opposite of Carson Strong, who stays in that pocket, who's, progressing through his reads and is basically just looking to rely on that arm, because he's not the most mobile dude in the world. As Matt Mumme said today, couldn't run out of sight in 2 days, which was a great coaching line. But that offense, when they had it under Ganji, they really relied on letting him improvise and run around and, play action and just using his legs. When Carson got there, they flipped it. That's what good coaches do. And that's why I'm really intrigued about Matt Mumme being in town. And obviously, if you listen to the DNVR Rams podcast, Nevada was my favorite team to watch these past couple of years, at least from the Mountain West side, because they were just so aggressive all the time. And I'm really, really pumped to have that mentality here in Fort Collins. And I'm really, hoping we get to have a lot more interaction with these coordinators than we did the last couple of years, because I think we can just learn a lot from them. Obviously, Matt Mumme is from a family that lives and breathes football. His perspective is great to get. I hope they have open practices like Norvell did at Nevada, not even so that we can be there all day. I'm not like one of those media guys that, we don't need to be there at every second of practice. A lot of it is, not necessary. But would be nice to be able to talk to the coordinators, more than once a season. And I don't know that it's going to be that way, but it kind of seems like it. All right, let's move on and talk about Freddie Banks. But one more thing here on Matt Mumme. I really like how honest he was when I asked him about, the dirty little secret that is why players transfer, and that's that their allegiances are much more tied to coaching staffs, to systems, than it is the color of their jersey, than the school that they attend. And I know that a lot of coaches don't want to admit that publicly because it kind of goes against what we romanticize about college football, and that it's, about everyone in the community and all of that. And all of those aspects are still great, and they still are a big part of college football. But in this modern era, the players, they have some flexibility to do what's best for them. And I know that it sucks when your team just gets gutted. It's a brutal situation. I mean, when you look at Wyoming right now, or CU, I mean, they're getting absolutely gutted by the transfer portal, and that's brutal. When you just have to sit there and, oh, I can't criticize anyone. Like, the fans are loyal to CSU, to CU, to whatever school they root for. Players, not so much. It's about doing what's best for them. And, Matt, he kind of laid it out bluntly. He's like, look, we didn't have to coerce these players to want to come over. They came to Nevada in the first place because these coaches had established a relationship with them that went back multiple years. They stayed at Nevada because they liked playing for them. They were sold on that system. They had an opportunity to stay in it. It's obviously easy to transfer within the conference now. So they did, and I respect that he laid it out so bluntly, because again, I think so many coaches just try and tap dance around it and lie, or just act like it's not happening, but it is. So let's just say, call a spade a spade. Players want to transfer because they're doing what's best for them. They have that right. Respect it. It's fine. It is what it is. It's still exciting. I think the transfer portal has added a completely different layer of offseason to college football that we didn't necessarily have before. I mean, there was recruiting. It's not like we didn't talk about college football year round, but it really is different now. I mean, it's kind of like NFL or NBA free agency or something. And I get why people don't like it. I get that it makes it harder to establish continuity long term. I get why the fans don't like it. But it's just the situation we're in. And so I like that these coaches are just kind of putting it out there and saying, you can be upset about it. I think this is probably more directed towards, Nevada people, but it's just the reality of the game now. And players want to play for coaches they like. We saw it with CU with Christian Gonzalez following his position coach from CU to Oregon. I mean, it's just the game now. It is what it is. Now that Louis Adazio's at Nevada, we might see some of these offensive linemen that came in, to play under Steve transfer over there. Like, okay, it's just part of the process. Anyways, I want to talk about defense, but the NFL playoffs are here. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is kicking things off with a huge offer. Counting down to Super Bowl 56, new customers can get 56-1 odds on any wildcard team to win their game. Bet $5, win $280 in free bets if your team is victorious. All customers can get in with the DraftKings Hammer the Over promotion. For every 5,000 bettors who take the over for Saturday night's New England Buffalo game, the point total will lower by half a point. I think it's at like 27 right now. Hammer the Over has hit every single time DraftKings has run it, so bettors won when the first point was scored. Hopefully we can get it down there again. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the promo code DNVR Get 56-1 odds on any NFL team. Bet $5, win $280 in free bets if your team wins. That's with the promo code DNVR this wildcard weekend at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only, new customers only, restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. Speaking of DraftKings, I'm going to give out my DraftKings pick of the week. We're getting to that time where there's no football games, and that's what I love to rely on for this. Spreads, the easy, fast plays. And now we're kind of getting into futures bet territory and kind of the long play. I've been really enticed by the NBA MVP odds of late. If you look, Steph Curry is currently the betting favorite, followed shortly by Kevin Durant. Nikola Jokic is up there. The guy I'm really intrigued by right now, Ja Morant of the Memphis Grizzlies. You can get that at plus 3,000 on DraftKings Sportsbook. It's not that I necessarily think that Ja is the best player in the NBA or he's going to win or anything like that. I just think from a value perspective, it's one of the best plays you can make, because in a year where it's all just kind of the same, Steph is the favorite, but his numbers are kind of down. Brooklyn's a weird situation. The Nuggets are a weird situation. There is a realistic scenario in which Memphis makes a run. Ja gets that credit. So I just really love the value at plus 3,000. Again, I'm not saying he's going to win, but I do think he's firmly in that conversation. And I think that value is only going to get worse as it goes on. So why not take advantage now? On DraftKings pick of the week, Ja Morant win the NBA MVP. Get that at plus 3,000 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Okay, let's talk Freddy Banks, and then let's move on to Utah State, wrap up with some hoops talk. We don't know quite as much about Banks. Mumme, obviously, I've been diving into for a couple weeks now just because he's beneficial. That hire's been on the table. We knew this Banks move was happening for a couple weeks, but, today was the first time we got to talk with him, really learn much about him. He talked about his idol, Scotty Hastings, who's the Michigan State defensive coordinator, coached him at North Dakota State. I look forward to kind of diving into some of their defenses and seeing what I can learn about Banks from it. Haven't had that opportunity yet, obviously. But the main thing he kind of talked about is he wants his defenders to play aggressive, but he also wants to simplify things. He wants to be able to identify a couple of things that everybody does really, really well, and then just have them do that over and over again. Do 1 to 3 things well. You don't have to do 5, 6 things perfectly. And just identify those roles and kind of get everybody to buy in to what they're expected to do. One of the examples he laid out is there might be a defensive end who's better suited on first and second down that, can defend the run, that is going to fill those gaps. But there might be a guy that just is a bat out of hell on third down and can really get after the quarterback. And if that's the case, they're going to play that guy on third down because he's better in that situation. Or, if you're the defensive end and you're blowing up the tackle so that a linebacker can make a tackle on the, outside, be excited about that. He just wants everybody to embrace their roles and not feel like they have to do everything because, when you're trying to do everything, I think you can just think too much. And I do think we saw that with some of the CSU defenders, especially late in the year, when injuries were a big factor and the depth just wasn't there and they had guys playing really probably too many snaps in the trenches. So I think this is going to be an intriguing option. I mean, when you watch the NFL, there's so much rotation that happens, in that front seven. And really that just wasn't the case with CSU. It was, we got like 7, 8 dudes. There's a little bit of rotation here and there at edge and a little bit of movement on the interior. But other than that, it's the same linebackers, same defensive end. And we're going to run that 80 snaps a game. And you could just see in the fourth quarter how they would wear down. So I really like this approach, and I think it's going to be good. And I also think you're going to be able to get some guys more snaps and develop them better. That's the other thing, it was so tough for CSU defensively to have some of these guys fill in at the end. It's just because they weren't getting any playing time up until then. Now all of a sudden they've got to, fill this starting role, play 60 plus snaps. And it was a disaster. So I like that. He's excited to reunite with Jay Norvell. I'm intrigued to see what he does. Bringing over a couple of FCS guys and Adam Pilipel and Buda Williams, who's going to coach the defensive line actually coached against him in the FCS national championship game because he was over at North Dakota State. I'm interested to see how that kind of all plays out. I don't think it's that big of a gap. I mean, obviously we see FCS teams beat Mountain West teams pretty frequently. So, I'm not really worried about that or anything like that. But I liked Freddie Banks's demeanor. I liked what we were able to learn from him today. I'm interested to see in what he brings to these defensive backs. It's a small sample size, but from what he was able to accomplish this season as the Montana State defensive coordinator, I really think he's going to fit in well with what kind of CSU is trying to establish. Just, aggressive defense. Obviously, Norvell wants to play man coverage, bump and run, and they got to go out and find some guys that can do it. Kelly Lyle asked him, there have been coaches over the years that have kind of made excuses in regards to, oh, we can't find that type of player. We can't find those type of corners that can play bump and run in the Mountain West because if they were good enough to play man, they'd be scooped up by the SEC and all that. And Banks was smart. He didn't like clap back or anything like that, and he tried to be respectful. And he's like, "Look, I don't know who said that." He's like, "But I think there's more than enough guys that to go out there and find." And the big thing that he laid out is when you're recruiting high school, the best athletes on the field aren't necessarily playing cornerback. They're getting the football. They're wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks. The ball is in their hand every single play because they're just the best athletes on the field, and the coaches want to have the best opportunity to win. That's usually, relying on your best athletes. So what they're going to do is, go out and find some of these running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, wherever they may be playing, and they're going to turn them into cornerbacks, and they're going to coach them up, and they're going to develop them. But it's identifying those raw traits and, kind of being able to make it work. It's, finding solutions, not excuses. And I like that because I think far too frequently that is an easy cop out for coaches at the G5 level. Like, oh, we couldn't get a good quarterback because the guy we offered was recruited by, a Power 5. And sometimes that is the case. Sometimes there's just going to be a bigger school with more resources, and you're not going to be able to bring in the guys that you want. That's the reality of the game sometimes. Sometimes it's also just, G5 coaches kind of using that as an excuse. Like, clearly, if you work hard enough, you can pull a Clay Millen every now and then. And that's what Norvell talked about. He's like, we want to establish relationships with these guys, and it's really worked for them so far, and it's seeming to really work well. CSU. All right, I think that's enough for what we learned today. I do want to talk about the basketball game though. Kind of a weird game against Utah State last night. So we're gonna get into that, and I don't know. People need to relax a little bit. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have high standards, especially with a team that's as talented as this is, but I mean, they're 12-1. They're stacked with talent. And anytime there's like a rough 4-minute stretch or, somebody misses a couple of free throws, maybe a couple of open jump shots, the knee-jerk reaction that ensues it's just absurd. This isn't the NBA, guys. It's not Steph Curry out there shooting. It's not Nikola Jokic at the free throw line. They are going to miss open shots sometimes. Even the best college basketball teams still have, 5+ pretty ugly games a year because it's amateur basketball, guys. It just is. This team is so talented. They play with so much poise. I feel like the fan base at times is kind of trying to manufacture crises that just don't exist. We have seen now over 2 years, over such a large sample size, that the Rams are not just one of the best offensive teams in the Mountain West. They're one of the more efficient offensive teams in the entire country. Isaiah Stevens has one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the country. David Roddy is one of the most efficient scorers in the country. We don't need to freak out that this team is not, firing on all cylinders right now when they just had 24 days off. And I get that they've now played 3 games in about 8 days. And we should kind of see that rust kind of subside here in the future games. But I also get that, it's not going to look like it did in that opening night victory against Oral Roberts when you've been practicing for weeks and, everything was in sync and you're ready to go and you've got the energy of the crowd and the excitement of the season. And I don't know. I just think at times Ram fans need to be a little bit more realistic with their expectations, a little bit more, I don't know, tempered, I guess, with the way that they approach watching these games. Because I mean, some of y'all are gonna have an aneurysm, dog. I mean, I'm getting tweets left and right, and like when I start getting tweets about like Roddy, criticizing Roddy or Stevens, it's just one of those where I'm just like, what are you watching? What are you watching? It was the same deal, with Trey McBride this past fall. I'm like, I get, if you want to criticize him, you could say the guy had a few too many unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, that type of stuff. But so what? He's the Mackey Award winner and he plays his ass off every single down. I'm not going to nitpick over every little thing. It's college sports. Just enjoy it a little bit. All right. Now that I've been able to get that off my chest, I can calmly talk about the game and how it played out. And David Roddy and Stevens were their typical awesome selves in this one. I mean, David Roddy gets 24 points. Isaiah Stevens finishes with 22. Roddy gets 6 rebounds. Isaiah Stevens paces the squad in assists with 4 in a team high 35 minutes. Was also plus 13 in that time. So good to see that he's making use of his minutes and just continuing to score. Again, kind of going back to my last point here. This team is producing at an insane rate. I get that some of the guys outside of Roddy and Stevens aren't really firing at their full capability offensively. I mean, Kendall Moore's had like, I don't even know, 10 air balls in the last 3 games. Adam Thistlewood missed like 4, wide open threes as well. That said, I don't think Nico Medved is going to be eager to shake up the lineup anytime soon. I asked him about it last night, and he didn't outright say he won't, but he did, add how much they trust these veterans. And I think they're trying to do right by their guys. These are guys that have just played such big roles in laying the foundation and helping establish this winning culture. I mean, it was an absolute disaster at Moby not that long ago, guys. And Adam and Kendall have played just such a big role in it. And I get that, they're not scoring at the same rate that we're used to, but they're also, like seamlessly taking steps back and letting these younger guys shine and not complaining about it and seeing their minutes decrease and still going out and playing hard defense and making that extra pass and going for rebounds and just doing the little work. And at the end of the day, like keeping them in the starting lineup, one, it's a recognition of the role that they've played in establishing the success of this program, but it's also just, mutual respect between player and coach. And ultimately, other than appearances, does it really matter that much? Like, you need reserves that are going to come in and score anyways. What they're doing from a rotational side, it's working. And at the end of the day, the best guys are going to play more minutes anyways. So, like, I get that Jalen Lake is really flashing right now. I get that Chandler Jacobs is living up to, the high expectations that everybody had. Those guys are going to play, 22 to 25 minutes a night. Well, maybe not quite that, maybe like 18 to 24 minutes a night based on situation. Adam played 13 minutes last night. I saw him after the game, chatting him up. He was in a great mood, pumped that they won. These guys are good teammates. They're good teammates. And I like when coaches do right by their guys. I think it benefits you long term. And I think shaking up the lineup, although I understand why there is some interest there because these guys off the bench are playing so well. I think if you're the coaches, you take this and when you're out recruiting, you say, look how we, stay right by our guys. Look what we do for them. We play them early. And even when we bring in more talent, we keep them in their spots. I think it's the long play and I think it's the right one. I do think maybe you explore some stuff later in the season, if guys are injured or if, they just never end up finding their shot this season. But even so, I still think, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, what you're doing is working. And I like the benefit of being able to bring in Jalen Lake and Tanjay, guys that just all of a sudden can hit 3 threes in a couple of minutes. And obviously Jacobs, what he can do defensively. And we're starting to see him, a little bit more confident on the offensive end as well. Whew, look out. Look out. But I think what just makes this team different is ultimately they just want to win. they're all willing to serve their roles. I mean, we kind of talked about that with football here a couple minutes ago, right? Like being willing to take a little bit less individual shine, maybe have a little bit less responsibility, but doing what you do really well for the greater benefit of the team. And that's what the Rams do. And that's why they're so fun to watch. And that's why on any given night, it might be Tanjay that beats you. It might be Jalen Lake that beats you. It usually is Stevens or Roddy that end up, beating you to death. But this team is just different. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they close it out. Really looking forward to Saturday's matchup. Obviously, the first opportunity for the Rams to face a Tim Miles squad since he returned to the Mountain West. Still don't understand how the league dropped the ball on that one and didn't have San Jose State coming to Moby Arena, where Tim Miles is beloved, and the crowd would have been a sellout, would have been an awesome atmosphere. And instead, it's going to be in San Jose, where they don't have fans, and there's going to be like 100 people in the arena. And it was Mountain West. The Mountain West is going to Mountain West. We'll just leave it at that. My apologies to everybody watching the game on TV last night. It sounds like there were some technical delays over the last couple of seconds. Ram fans watching at home actually missed the last couple of seconds, and it sounds like they lost the feed. Originally, people were tweeting at me that they just cut to commercial, and I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. I think they lost the feed, and that's why they cut to commercial. You cut them a little bit of slack. I mean, I get it. It's tough out there trying to produce a live product. So I get that, trust me, but I feel for the Ram fans that missed that one, because it really did come down to the final wire. They had to execute 3 inbound scenarios over the final 30 seconds. One of the times the Aggies actually defended it well, for CSU to call a timeout at the last second. And, obviously the Rams had to do some really clutch free throw shooting down the stretch as well. Made 8 over the final 30 seconds, made 14 in a row to close out the game. And that's winning basketball, guys. That's what winning teams do. And this was just a huge performance in a must-win situation for CSU. I don't want to be too overreactionary to the San Diego State loss. And that was, kind of why I tried to stop tweeting about it after really like 48 hours, because it was a fluky outcome in a tough situation. It sucks that CSU played their worst game of the season on the same day that San Diego State happened to play their best, but that's college basketball. And we saw this Rams team respond in a major way against a really stout defensive unit in Utah State. They always play really physical. They're always going to challenge you. Obviously, they never laid down in that one. Anytime CSU tried to pull away, they just, another 7-0 run from Utah State, and all of a sudden it's a one possession game. But I want to shout out Chandler Jacobs for the impact he made on this one defensively. I think his addition to the program I think it's legitimately worth like 2 to 3 wins this season. That's how big of an impact I think he makes individually. Just you can put him on the opposing team's best wing. You can put him on a point guard. He was defending Utah State's 5 in the paint at times yesterday. I mean, there's just nothing on the floor that he can't do. And it's that versatility that he and Roddy and Tanjay and some of these guys have that makes the Rams just such a tough cover. And I don't know, they're just so fun to watch, man. I love covering this team, and I really enjoy creating content about them. And I know you guys enjoy consuming it, because the numbers are great. So I'm looking forward to continuing it over the weekend. Obviously, we will cover that San Jose State game in depth. I've got some recruiting stuff to write about from football. The Rams added a former P5 kicker, the Oregon starting kicker from last season. Drawing a blank on his name at the moment. Don't want to call him the wrong name. So we'll go over that on tomorrow's podcast, get into that as well. Thank you to everybody that continues to support our content. You guys make my dreams come true. Allow me to do what I love for a living. And without all of you guys, none of it would be possible. So shout out to you. Now's a great time to become a DNVR member. We've got awesome exclusive content for our DNVR members. It's NFL draft season. If you're into that, we're really going to ramp up our draft coverage. Obviously, big implications here in the Mile High City with the Broncos. Make sure you check out everything the Broncos guys are doing as well. We've got the draft pod once a week. I think that's about it. So much love to all of you. Thank you for tuning in to DNVR Rams Live, presented by Chevalier Mortgage. I'll be back with the DNVR Rams podcast tomorrow. It will be in your podcast feeds as usual. Much love, y'all. Go Rams.